It has been a long, stinking time, but here I am, Mac, back to give you another episode of Mac Music Review. Today we're looking at the top 10 albums of 2019. Before I hop into my actual top 10, I want to talk about some honorable mentions, and there are quite a few, and we're just going to, these are albums that, were really great that I really want to talk about. And after I talk about those, we're going to hop into the actual best albums. Here we go. My first honorable mention is the album Magdalene by FKA Twigs. Magdalene is a really, really, really great album, but it's one that's kind of hard to listen to, and it's kind of just not something that I ever really came back to. I really listened to the album once, said that was fantastic. I can understand the hype behind this album. Pitchfork put this as their second best album of 2019, and I can totally understand that placement. It is an extremely impressive album, musically and vocally. Lyrically, it's not as amazing as it is musically and vocally, but still, this is a really great album. My next album on this list is Be Clean Again by Heath McNease, and this is an album and an artist you probably haven't heard of. I found about Heath McNease. This is the first Heath McNease album I've ever heard. He's a Christian singer who also does rap. He did a rap album called Thrift Store Jesus, which is really, really great. But this has been claimed as his crowning achievement of his whole career. Like, this is the best thing he's ever done. And it's a very dark hip-hop album, a very dark rap album that does offer hope. He is a Christian, and so you're going to get the Christian, hopeful perspective, but a lot of darkness on this album, a lot of very somber, very dark moments. It's a really great album. I highly recommend you check this one out. Even if you're not a big rap fan, the lyrical content on this one, and basically everything is really commendable. And it's a really great album. Titanic Rising by Weyesblood. On Metacritic, this is one of the highest rated albums of the year. This is one of the most critically acclaimed albums of the year. Anthony Fantano put it in his top 50 at like number 12. And, he gave it a 9. And Art TV also put it in his top 20. So this really wouldn't be a good top 10 list without including Titanic Rising. I actually own this album, and it's fantastic. It's just a really, really great album. I just highly recommend you check it out. I never thought I would ever put a Brockhampton project on a top 10 list, or even on an honorable mention, or even talk about Brockhampton, because I really think they're really, really overrated and don't care for them a whole lot. But this honorable mention will be Ginger by Brockhampton. I really, really like this project. I didn't listen to it. One of the reasons why it's not in the top 10 is I never really came back to this project. I listened to it 2 or 3 times, or 3 or 4 times when it first came out, and was really impressed by it. The lyrical content is much better than their other work, a lot more profound, a lot more serious. And it suits them very well that when they were trying to write serious lyrics, they actually do a very good job. And I really enjoyed... Oh. Sorry about that. I really enjoyed this album. Great album. Check it out. Another artist I'm really surprised to be talking about, my next honorable mention is We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. I don't listen to a lot of metal music, but this is very, very, very good metal music. This is really, really great sounding stuff. Lyrics hit hard, music hits hard, vocals hit hard. Basically everything on this album hits pretty hard. My only complaint, the only reason this isn't in the top 10, like I said, I'm not a big fan of metal. I can realize this is an excellent metal album, but it's just, for me, it's not my favorite. It's not my cup of tea. This isn't my thing, but I did really, really enjoy this album. Man, the sun! Are you kidding me? This is awful. This is so bad. Okay, I'm not dying now. Oh, my eyes are like burning from the sun. That was awful. Okay, Igor by Tyler, the Creator, is my brother Jackson's #1 favorite album of the year. I have a manager at work, and he said this is the best album of the year. Nominated at the Grammys for Best Rap Album. Hopefully it'll win. Definitely the best rap album nominated. Definitely one of the best rap albums of the year. Igor, for me, I went to the concert. Absolutely fantastic live. Much better than just listening to it. Highly recommend you see Tyler the Creator live. Just puts on a fantastic show. An amazing performer. Probably one of the best performers of our age, specifically in the rap genre. But really great album. Just don't really like the songs Earthquake or the last song. Besides that, really great album. My last honorable mention is the album Father of the Bride by Vampire Weekend. This is the only album in this entire list. I don't own any of the albums. I don't own a physical copy of any of the albums in the top 10, but I owned this, and I also own Titanic Rising, and I would have brought it out, but I forgot that I owned it. I was like going over my head. I said, do I own any of these albums? And I do own Titanic Rising, and I just forgot to bring it out here for the video. But, you know, Father of the Bride, excellent album. Nominated for Album of the Year. It would be really cool if it won, but there are actually better albums that were nominated for Album of the Year, and we're going to get into that in the top 10. So here we go. This is number 10. There Existed an Addiction to Blood. This album, by Clipping, this album blew me out of the water. This is one of the most creative albums. Musically, this album, listening to this album is an experience. This is a horrorcore album, or it's like horrorcore, with just really gruesome, very detailed imagery. And you know, a very scary vibe, and the song's very dark lyrics, and the whole album is just very dark and very inspired by horror movies. It takes like clips from horror movies. It just sounds like this album is basically a horror movie audio experience, like a horror movie in the form of an album. And it's extremely detailed, it's extremely interesting, extremely creative. Honestly, just a really, really great album. He did it! Jay Givens made another album. If you watched my channel, if you saw my top albums of the decade, you know I love Jay Givens. Jay Givens is literally he's in probably my top 3 favorite rappers of all time. Kendrick's my number 1. Jay Givens might be my number 2, and then Kanye. It'd be like Jay Givens, Sho Baraka, Kanye, those are all in the top 5. But this guy is amazing. Oh man. This album is definitely a step down for Jay Givens, I think, in terms of lyrical content, but the production and his rapping is just fantastic. He is really great on this album. He just gives a fantastic performance, and his music and production is very varied on this album, sometimes very low-key, and always excellent, always great, or almost always excellent. I think this album is really going to grow on me the more I listen to it. Every time I come back to this, I find more stuff that I like. Domino, check it out, it's great. Norman frickin' Rockwell. This was Pitchfork's number 1 album of the year. They gave it a 9.4. This was in Anthony Fantano's best albums of the year. This is in a whole bunch of top 10 lists of best albums of the year. This was like number 19 or 20 on their Pitchfork's best albums of the decade. It was like in the top 20, I'm pretty sure. Like, this album is pretty fantastic. It's an insane step up for Lana Del Rey, because Lana Del Rey is a garbage artist that I know has had a popular fan base, and her songs always come up on my stations that I listen to, my artist-specific stations, or dark pop, or alternative stations. It's impossible to get away from her, and she was so garbage, I hated her, and this album made me do a 180 flip, and now I really like Lana Del Rey because of this album. This is an excellent album. The Fall of Hobo Johnson. I've been eagerly awaiting this album since hearing the singles. Actually, ever since I heard The Rise of Hobo Johnson, his debut album. I've been looking forward to this album because he just put so much on the table on that album. He proved with the Rise of Hobo Johnson, his debut album, he proved that he was a really creative, extremely original artist. He was just so interesting, and he was a really likable guy. His lyrics were extremely honest, extremely dark, and a lot of that is carried over into The Fall of Hobo Johnson, but overall, this is a more upbeat album. This is a much more joyful record. There's a lot more light at the end of the tunnel in this album, except for the song "Sorry My Dear," which is one of the best of the album, one of the best of the year, and probably the darkest, most heartbreaking song of the whole year. Excellent album. I really, really like this album. Purple Mountains by Purple Mountains. The first and last Purple Mountains album, and that's really a shame because it's really excellent. The lead singer of Purple Mountains, also the lead singer of Silver Jews, died. I think his name is David. I think his first name is David, and it's something like David Bryan. I really don't want to say it because I don't know exactly what his name is, which is pretty terrible. But this is a great album. I really haven't listened to this album a ton, but just from the little I've listened to, songwriting is scathing and very, very sad, dark, fantastic. Music is really, really great. Listen to the song Darkness and Cold. One of the best songs of the year. Fantastic song. Another album that really surprised me, another album that by an artist who I've never listened to. I've never listened to Tom York's solo stuff, and somehow, thanks to Pitchfork and Metacritic, I heard this album was great, and I gave it a shot, and my brother really likes Radiohead, so he was, of course, a fan of this album, and it turned out to be pretty great. This was a great album. I mean, it's really excellent. It has the best song of the year, probably the best song of the year. I'm not entirely, I'm not going to make a top songs of the year list, most likely, but the Dawn chorus is utterly fantastic. Other people, other critics have talked about this song, other music commentators have talked about this song, and it's really a beautiful, fantastic, one of the best songs of the decade, in my opinion. A truly amazing song. Check out Anima, it's really great. Morbid Stuff. This was ARTV's album of the year. It was on Anthony Fantano's best albums of the year. This is the most fun album of 2019. This is the most enjoyable, headbanging, fun album of 2019. It is a pop punk album by another band who I've never listened to. This 2019 was a year of surprise for me. Like a bunch of surprise. My albums in my top 10 are by artists I never listened to. I never listened to Clipping. I never listened to Lana Del Rey. I've never heard of Purple Mountains because that was, of course, their debut album. But it was just full of surprises. This year was full of surprises. And even in the top 3, it's all artists I've never listened to besides in 2019. But this was a really great album. So much fun. Very, very dark. Very sad album with the lyrical content. But honestly, this is the most fun, enjoyable album of 2019. Thanks to the excellent music, vocals, lyrics, and sarcasm. I love this album. Ghosteen is the highest rated album of the decade on Metacritic. This is the highest rated album of the decade on Metacritic, which is crazy. That's totally crazy. Actually, it might be tied for To Pimp a Butterfly now because I think the rating went down 1. So it was 97, it was 96, and To Pimp a Butterfly is 96. But honestly, this was an honorable mention in my best albums of the decade list, and for good reason. Devastating album, devastating songwriting, extremely dark, but also a little bit hopeful. Not as dark as The Skeleton Tree, because that was written like very closely after the death of Nick Cave's son, and this is more of like the aftermath. And it's really, really, really beautiful album. Mixes ambient music, and it's very original. Vocals are great. Lyrics are really fantastic. Really, really fantastic album. This album was the best surprise of the year. I'm going to be honest. This was the album I was most happy about discovering. This is the artist I was the most happy about discovering this year. And it's all thanks to Spectrum Pulse. Thank you, Spectrum Pulse, for giving this album a platform, for talking about this album. It's very small. It's very insignificant. This is Between the Country by Ian No. This is a modern country album that sounds like it was made 20 years ago. Like, everything about this album sounds much older, and it's an incredibly dark country music album. Super dark, occasionally at times uncomfortable. The song Meth Head literally just makes me, like, my skin crawl. It's an uncomfortable song. And these songs are dark, and they're beautiful, and they're powerful, and this is a fantastic country album. This album gives country music hope. This album gives modern country music hope. I absolutely love Between the Country. This is Psychodrama by Dave. Best album of the year. It's the only album this year that made me cry, which I think, it was really tough between the top 3, but this is the only album that made me cry, like 3 times, so I picked it. It's ARTV, made it number 4 in his best albums of the year, and I'm really glad he did. This was the highest rated debut album of the year on Metacritic. This was the number 1 debut album of the year on Metacritic, and it's pretty fantastic. The lyrics on this thing are fantastic. The music, while minimal, while kind of sparse, while not really super duper ambitious and out there, is very, very, very good, and it works extremely well with the vocals and the lyrics. And Psychodrama is an experience. This is a beautiful, fantastic album. Highly recommend it. And it's my number one for the year. 2019 was a fantastic year for music. Even so, you know, it's funny that I'm just reflecting on it. 2019 was so good for music, and I didn't have a single one of these albums in my top albums of the decade. Or 2018. You know, I think I'm going to go back, because this was so much fun to make this list, to listen to these albums, compile this list. It was really, I really enjoyed, like, finding out about these albums and, like, really listening to them more, and, like, all that was just really great. So I'm probably going to do a best albums of 2018 list. Once again, 2018 and 2019 were years where I didn't have why can I not talk right now? I didn't have a single album from 2018 or 19 in my best albums of the decade, which is kind of crazy because 2019 was fantastic for music. Most of these albums on this top 10 list, if you were paying attention, are very dark. These albums are very dark. Very little fun is to be had in my top 10. But it was a really great year for music. Thank you for watching. What are some of your favorite albums of the year? What's your album of the year? What's your top 10, if you want to tell me? What's your top 5? Any of that. I would love to know what albums you loved listening to that were released in 2019. Thank you for watching the video.